Good morning, everybody. My name is David Furlow. I'm the executive editor of the Texas Supreme Court Historical Society Journal, and I will tell you that you'll have a chance to see those pictures that technicalities precluded Laura from showing you if you go to our spring 2013 issue, where Laura wrote an excellent article that goes through every step of the historic preservation process at the state archives and shows you that big pressing machine and all of those other things. And we'll be happy to share that with anybody who sends me an email. But if you go to Texas Supreme Court Historical Society, you'll see all of our issues listed on the right-hand side of the journal, and you'll find some very interesting things there. Today I'm talking about the First Amendment as it relates to some of the historic court records that Laura was telling you about. And I'm going to tell you that, basic issues here. The First Amendment is the first because it's the most important. It protects our freedom of conscience. It protects us from being oppressed by an official establishment, an official religious establishment that would suppress the rights of others. Of course, it protects our freedom of speech. So here I'm going to be addressing an issue that has its Texas ramifications, specifically with Sam Houston's Bible he purchased when he was in New York in the year 1820. And our journal has also published an article on that by Texas Supreme Court archivist, Ms. Shropshire, and you'll find that in one of our issues too, that goes through how we were able to establish that this particular Bible, the same Bible every Texas Supreme Court justice and governor, most recently Governor Abbott, swears his oath of office on. That's also an issue in our journal, and I commend it highly to you. This we'll go through here and look at some of the most controversial issues I could present. The issue of school prayer, beginning with Reverend Billy Graham responding to the 1962 and 1963 decisions of the U.S. Supreme Court, where he expressed his view that 80% of the American people would oppose the Supreme Court. Why should the majority be so severely penalized by the protests of a handful? Well, that's what we're going to be examining now and see the way it's played out in the courts. When we look at school prayer issues, we ask, things such as, is governmental prayer promulgation and enforcement a divisive thing in American history? Can we actually show, what old debaters would say, blood on the flow, deaths and disaster? And we can. Can government favor one sect over another, one prayer over another, one Bible over another, and remain within the confines of the First Amendment? And when can Texas schools teach the Bible as history or literature if they can't teach it as religious instruction and morality? Should school districts write or regulate the prayers little children say in school? These are the issues we address. Now, these are matters that have a currency today because these are still hotly debated between the political parties and our issues. Grasping the fundamentals. The public knows, the vast majority of the public knows, that a school-mandated prayer being led by a teacher violates the First Amendment. They've absorbed that in the past 50 years. But what few know, less than a quarter know, is that the same decisions that took mandatory school prayers out of our schools also recognized the central importance of the Bible, which could be taught as religion, as a religious history text, or as a text fundamental to American government, or to the religious history of this country, which is a fundamental issue. So the very same Supreme Court that has been chastised so many times for throwing the Bible out of the schools did no such thing, and in fact said that the Bible is an appropriate way to teach history and literature. We'll have questions at the end of our session where you can question Laura and Bill and me about this, but in the meantime, I'm going to go through some of the polls that make this matter relevant to today. Today, at this point in time, or at least 2014, 57% of the American people, a pretty good majority, disapprove of the Supreme Court's decisions, while a growing minority, now up to 39%, and some polls say 42%, think that that was a pretty good idea. The most interesting thing is that Gallup in 2005 and subsequently find that a majority of the American people now prefers the concept of a moment of silence, whether for prayer, recollection, or just trying to cram hard for the next final, over spoken prayers led by teachers. As reflected in this poll, showing that 70% of the people supported a moment of silence at the beginning of class, as opposed to 24% who wanted the written, who wanted the spoken prayer. And we see, the change in the dynamics there from 1995 to 2005. Let's begin with the fundamental reality. In the colonial era, except for Roger Williams's Providence Plantation and Rhode Island colony, for the most part, all of the original American colonies had no separation of church and state, or only minimal ones, such as Maryland. And so what we had here was a time in which children learned from their horn books how to spell, and the horn book had the Lord's Prayer on it. And if you'll note here at the very front, you'll see the little children praying. Praying was a fundamental part of the American colonial experience and early experience in America, although the use of prayer and religious instruction began to drop during the fundamentally practical 19th century, where people began focusing on teaching children math and science and business, so it was dropping off during the 19th century. And at that point in time, that's when religious reformers and school reformers began contemplating, how to inculcate morality through the use of the old-time religion, good enough for daddy, good enough for me. We look at that, we'll see that the King James Bible played a fundamental role in a sort of pan-Protestantism throughout the United States of America. And one of the reasons is because courts didn't really examine it in the context of other Bibles. I'm going to talk about those other Bibles here for a few minutes. Well, the reason we have a King James Bible today, and it is so prominent in society, is because King James hated the Geneva Bible and the Bishop's Bible, but especially the Geneva Bible, that was the one that came over on the Mayflower and with John Winthrop up to New England. And the reason he hated it more than any other is because the people who translated the Geneva Bible did so under John Calvin's leadership in Geneva, which was something like a city-state of syndicalism with enormous political and religious influence of John Calvin. So, his group of translators living in a republic and not in a kingdom looked at the word sarin, an old Philistine word in the Bible that comes back from the Mycenaean Greek ancestry of the Philistines, and sarin, T-S-E-R-R-E-N, goes right back to that Greek root tyrannos, for king. So they translated it literally, and you can imagine that King James wasn't fond of a Bible that consistently referred to kings as tyrants. He hated the Bible for a number of other reasons too, and so after the gunpowder plot, he wasn't going to trust the Catholics with their Bibles or instruction from the papacy about how to properly pray, so he ordered the commission through Oxford University of the King James Bible. Here is another one. This is one I actually found in the archives of the the Massachusetts Historical Society. This is Pilgrim Isaac Allerton's Geneva Bible. It came over on the Mayflower. Its cover is ruined because of salt water. The front and back of it are gone. But what's fascinating is it's a fossil record of the thought of the Pilgrims and the Puritans, because it's extensively cross-referenced and noted. And there's all these notes. This is a thinking man's Bible, an idiot's guide, if it were in the modern day, to understanding those fundamental concepts of religion so fundamental to people's souls. That's not what King James wanted. He wanted the King of England and the Church of England to tell people how to think about the Bible in a sort of papacy-like way. And so here you see the Oxford scholars, perhaps including, as a consultant, William Shakespeare, presenting the King James Bible to King James in 1611. Here we have the King James Bible, which was intended to replace all those pesky Geneva Bibles. And it comes to dominate American school teaching in the early 19th century as a part of pan-Protestantism. The Secretary of the Massachusetts State Educational Board is trying to find a way to bridge all these pesky gaps in doctrine and procedure between his native Congregationalists and those Virginians down in the Chesapeake who like the King James Bible and other things. So he comes up with the idea, we're going to focus on the essence of Protestantism by teaching the King James Bible as the Bible, but instructing teachers not to comment on it, because they could just get lost in all sorts of sectarian divides. We're going to have essentially a least common denominator Protestantism to inculcate morality to our little children. And that sweeps west. The interesting thing, though, is that the plan doesn't work out quite as anticipated almost immediately after the King James Bible comes into fruition. And we see that in the city of brotherly love itself, Philadelphia. You know, Penn's city of brotherly love, the site where the Constitution and the First Amendment were put together. Here we have Independence Hall. And at that time, as a result of a massive influx of principally Irish and then Italians and then other peoples of Catholic ancestry that generated such things as the Know Nothing Party in opposition to papal control of the United States, what you had is Catholics confronting the use of the King James Bible and finding fault with it. And why would they do so? Because the King James Bible is a Protestant Bible. It's the idea that you present the Bible to people and they think for themselves, and they can read it for themselves. They don't need anybody's proper instruction. They can read from the book itself. But priests in the Catholic Church, with over 1,000, 2,000, almost 2,000 years of experience, know that the Bible can be read in different ways. That's why they were skeptical of the Protestant, revolt. And so, to Catholics, it's not that anybody can read it, but priests should share the result of their education. It's a sort of a top-down an educated elite view of what the Bible's lessons are. And so they oppose the idea that anybody could read the King James Bible and get the right understanding of it each and every time. Also, the King James Bible differs from their Douay Bible. It doesn't have the Book of Apocrypha. It's missing a number of the Psalms. And so they didn't want their children educated in this. The King James Version, its prayer differs from the Catholic version. Catholics who believed in the inerrancy of the Pope and the essence of their religion didn't want a competing Bible being used to instruct their little children. And after all, they didn't like the idea that here's a Bible commissioned by this heretic king of England who went around and was responsible for the deaths of over 130 priests and other people, largely after the gunpowder plot, when a papal Jesuit plot to blow up both houses of Parliament with King James in them backfired and was discovered only days before the Stuart era could have ended in a big bang in 1605. So, Catholics had their doubts about the King James Bible. They preferred the Catholic Douay Bible that we saw here. And in Philadelphia, they encountered growing nativist hostility to them as Catholics, just as if they were encountering that up in England, where the great holiday was Guy Fawkes Day, and people would do pleasant things that would enamor themselves to the Catholics, like burning effigies of the Pope. Well, some of that was going on in Philadelphia too. And in 1841 to 42, the school district followed the lead of Massachusetts and said, we're going to have a Bible that erases all these differences between Congregationalist and Baptist and Methodist. We're going to adopt the King James Bible for school prayers in all schools every day, every morning. And then the school board fires a Catholic who, on grounds of conscience, refuses to use the King James Bible. And then the bishop down there begins asking for exceptions from this board of controllers to let Catholic children read the Douay Bible, and that's tentatively agreed. And then the Protestants go berserk, essentially complaining that the school board is bending over backward for these papists. And so hostilities rise, and then the city of brotherly love becomes the city of brotherly hate, because there's this rumor that the Catholics are insisting about ending use of the King James Bible in all classes. It's a false rumor, but it's believed. And as a result, in two series of riots that occur on May 6th and 8th, and then in mid-July, in early July of 1844, you have gunfire, cannons, burning, 29 people dead, 66 suffer serious injuries. The governor has to bring in 5,000 troops to restore order. And after the riots, the bishop, who was just asking that Catholic kids be excused, be allowed to use their Douay version, he withdraws that, says we can't expect to get anything respectful of Catholicism in these schools. And so that's where all of the Catholic parochial schools in America began, with this idea to give children their own schools where they could hear their own Bible and have their own religion respected in their own way, which to me explains why I was always seeing the kids wearing the plaid outfits and going over to St. Thomas More Elementary School when I was growing up in Houston. That's where it begins, in the city of brotherly love, which was also a city of brotherly arson in 1844 as two Catholic churches got torched. So these are things that had serious consequences. That was unknown to me when I began studying this case, where the Corsicana Independent School District and some folks down there in Corsicana had a dispute over the teaching of the King James Bible. And here we have the school district. Here's one of those, it's a case called Church versus Bullitt. Church was the leading agnostic in town. Bullitt was the school board representative. Here's one of Laura's case files. Goes up to the Dallas Court of Appeals, tried in 1906, appealed to the Dallas Court of Civil Appeals in 1907, goes up to the Texas Supreme Court in 1908. The plaintiffs, we have agnostic Edwin F. Church. Let's look at him for a moment. There's an idea that a lot of the plaintiffs in these type of constitutional cases are dour, sour people, who live on the fringes of the community. Not so for Ed Church. He's the cashier, the man charged with handing out the money at the First National Bank. He's a former fire department chief. He's the treasurer of Corsicana Ice Company. He's a partner in an insurance company. He is the essence of the community. Then you've got two Catholics. One of whom is Lita Garrity, who's the widow of Nicholas Garrity, Secretary and Superintendent, Texas Mill and Elevator Company, right prominent in the city. Then two of the members of the Hebrew community join in. One is a bartender, the other runs a retail grocery store, but they want to make sure that their children are not attending classes where the Bible that's being taught includes a lot more than the Torah. It includes the entire New Testament, and it teaches fundamentally that there was a prophet named Jesus Christ who was the Son of God, which is, not found in the traditional views of Judaism. So they didn't want their children taught that way. And what was going on in the schools up in Corsicana was children were reading verses from the King James Version. Children were reciting the King James Version's Lord's Prayer in concert and singing songs. They were doing that pursuant to the Corsicana School of Trustees resolution, and there were no participation exemptions for Catholics, Jews, agnostics, or anybody else. So that's where Mr. Church, the agnostic, says this is as bad here as the mixture of church and state that characterized Catholic Texas before the Revolution. And he cites the Texas Revolution, Declaration of Independence, and Texas constitutions going all the way back to 1836, as they had been recast almost intact in the Texas Constitution of 1876. So he's citing records from Independence Hall, Washington Brazos, Texas Declaration. That's what is going on there. And those are the sections he cites. Article 1, Section 6 and 7 of the Bill of Rights. Specifically, with greatest emphasis, all men have a natural and indefeasible right to worship Almighty God according to their dictates of their own consciences. No man shall be compelled to attend, erect, or support any place of worship, or to maintain any ministry against his consent. And their view, the view of the plaintiffs, was that their tax-paying dollars were being used to promulgate, uniform usage of the King James Bible, where their kids had to participate respectfully in the classes and had no opportunity to bail out for any reason. And they cited no human authority ought in any case whatsoever to control or interfere with the rights of consciousness, and that's what they saw being done to their children who faced peer pressure and punishment at the school. So they sued, also citing the Article 1, Section 7, no use of state taxes or monies for sectarian purposes. No money shall be appointed or drawn from the treasury. And then Church, in his briefing, says, in response to the city's argument, to Corsicana's arguments, that Christianity was part and parcel, and that was part and parcel of the United States from the very beginning. Church has the audacity to cite U.S. Treaty Number 122, the Treaty of Tripoli, which goes back to America's first war on terrorism against the Barbary Pirates, where the 1797 Treaty of Tripoli begins in Clause 11, as the government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion, as it has itself no character of enmity against the laws, religion, or tranquility of Muslims. It is declared by the parties that no pretext arising from religious opinion shall ever produce an interruption of the harmony existing between these peoples. And so our Congregationalist president, John Adams, approves it, signed on November 17 in 1796, and then later version 1797, John Adams adopts it, presents it to Congress. 5th U.S. Congress adopts that treaty and its clauses unanimously. The treaty becomes the rule of law of the land. The church cites that. People think there's always some smartass. And the trial court and the Dallas Court of Appeals, as you'll see, reject it. He moves for rehearing to preserve error and takes it up to the Texas Supreme Court. And here's a picture of the panel that he faced, the consensus court. Could call it the Confederate court because 2 of the judges had served in the Confederate Army. Chief Justice Reuben Gaines Reed, Associate Justice Frank Alvin Williams, and Associate Justice Thomas J. Brown. They're radical in many ways. All 3 were Protestant, and each swore his office on Sam Houston, King James Bible. Framing the constitutional issues, Sunday school teacher and prohibitionist Brown asked, does the evidence show that the exercises engaged in by the teachers of the school constitutes a school building a place of worship? Well, that's one way you could frame the issue. Another way you could frame the issue is, are taxpaying dollars used to support people being forced to participate in prayers that the Jewish kids and the agnostic and the Catholic disagree with, but that's not the way he chose to frame the issue. And as a result, I mean, you can read the whole opinion. That's just the core essence of it. The plaintiffs lost. The school district won. Justice Brown to hold that the offering of prayers, either by the repetition of the Lord's Prayer or otherwise, the singing of songs, whether devotional or not, and the reading of the Bible, make the place where such is done a place of worship, would produce intolerable results. Like morality would collapse, and this would be to starve the moral and spiritual natures of the many out of deference to the few, to the weirdos, to the agnostic, to the Jews, to the Catholics. And so, no constitutional violation. And here we have the Brian Morgan Eagle on the same affirmed case file. The Bible may be read, and religious ceremonies are protected, say the newspapers throughout Texas. The results were generic Protestant King James Version, least common denominator Protestantism governs the schools, Catholic Jews, Greek Orthodox, Unitarians, everybody else has to have their children in this system or else put them into parochial schools, and that's where we have a huge growth of Catholic and Jewish parochial schools in the state of Texas going back to the first decades of the 20th century. But here we have the shootout, the Texas shootout. I'm going to go a couple minutes over here just to look at this because the story doesn't end in 1908. Here's Ellery Shemp, the plaintiff in Abington School District versus Shemp in the U.S. Supreme Court. Unitarian, protester, First Amendment plaintiff, physicist, one of the guys who invented the MRI screening facility. This is the world he's growing up with in the 1950s school prayer. At the age of 16, he decides that the government should not be promulgating school prayers or enforcing them. He's a Unitarian. They don't believe in that. His brother and sister will continue the lawsuit. He brings in the ACLU to deal with morning devotions. That is, they all have to assemble, they all get the King James Version of the Bible reading and school prayer, and in 6th grade they have to read 10 Bible verses, or they're allowed to. So Ellery, not being one who plays well with others, begins reading all the begats, Abraham begat Isaac, and etc. And the teacher realizes this is getting a sexual theme, and he's not playing by the rules, and says no more begats, which in fact violated the rules of the statute because the teacher's not supposed to comment on Bible verses at all. So he's told that, and so he says, okay, no more begats. And then he begins reading from the Song of Solomon. You shall lie all night between my breasts, and the teacher begins to say, this child is a problem kid. And then on November 26th, he comes in there and brings in the Koran to read silently from it while everyone else is doing the King James Version, not because he's a smartass, but because he's trying to say there are other holy books, and there's no monopoly here. For that, he gets sent to the principal and gets to spend the time in the principal's office while readings go on afterwards. And he goes up to the U.S. Supreme Court, where Texan Tom Clark is there. And if you go to the Charlton Library, you'll be able to see all of his books and records of this decision, because he assembles an 8-1 majority. And his papers are there, and they include the vote, calculation, and a tally about how he's going to pull together this majority. And that's the vote memo. Then he summarizes the case, beginning by saying, this is another school prayer case, and to tell the justices that the same issues are the same as in Engel versus Vitale the previous year. And then he leads the 8-1 majority to rule that it's unconstitutional because it favors one group, King James Bible, over another. Just as in the previous year, they said that a least common denominator, pablum prayer, is not something the government ought to be doing in Engel versus Vitale. And that ends mandatory school prayer and overrules Church versus Bullock in Texas. And Abington is not hostile to the Bible because they specifically go and says that study of the Bible for religion or literature is perfectly fine. Just do it in a way that's neutral. And so some of the papers at the time had fun with this, like Herbach. What do they expect us to do? Listen to the kids pray at homes? And leaving religion to private initiative is un-American. The thing I'd like to point out is that separation of church and state has been the essence of America. When we had united church and state under the Anglican Church in the last decades prior to the American Revolution, attendance at church had dropped down to 22%. People who consider themselves to be religious are now up in the 60 levels, dropping a little bit, higher than any place in Europe where there is no separation of church and state. And it's precisely because the separation creates a thriving market for religious ideas where churches and synagogues and temples and mosques have to compete with each other for followers and offer programs including a wide variety of different views of conscience. This is the essence of America, and by looking at these cases, you get an essence of how the First Amendment its interpretation changes and evolves over time. I commend you to use the resources that Laura tells you are available. We'll put these programs on our Texas Supreme Court Historical Society in our journal, including the one that Bill is going to present after me. So thank you for your time.